Okay, today we want to talk a little bit more about mammals, their characteristics, but we want to talk about reproduction and some of the terminology that we have in that, so that we're all on the same page. Okay, one of the things that's common on all mammals is that they have internal fertilization. In other words, mom produces an egg or multiple eggs, depending on what kind of a mammal we're talking about. Like humans typically produce one egg, sometimes multiple eggs if you have multiple births, like fraternal twins, or sometimes triplets. Triplets, natural triplets are pretty rare. So she produces an egg, and then the male has to deposit sperm inside of her body so that the egg and the sperm can make another individual, an offspring. The term estrus, I don't know if any of you have heard that word, estrus. If you grew up on a farm or have been around a farm, that's the term that they use typically for cattle, animals that you find on the farm, and it refers to the period of time when the female's egg is ready to be fertilized. She doesn't have an egg that's just waiting to be fertilized. She produces it periodically. In humans, the females produce an egg roughly once a month. But in other animals, it can be more often. Like if it's mice, it happens a lot more often than that. But that's so if we're talking about a dog or a cat, we usually don't use the word estrus. We say that the female is in heat, right? We say that, ever heard that, like the cat or dog's in heat? That means the female has produced an egg and is ready to be fertilized. Unless we have the mammal has been neutered in some way, then that may not happen. But after the egg has been fertilized, the womb, the uterus, is going to produce a placenta to which the embryo will attach itself by means of an umbilical cord. And that placenta is an organ that connects the baby's blood and the mother's blood, but not to each other, but they run right next to each other. So in other words, it runs all the way down to the capillaries on mom, capillaries on the mother, and then the stuff transfers right across that really tiny boundary. Things like gases, in other words, baby needs oxygen, so it'll get its oxygen that way through that placenta. The baby's going to produce carbon dioxide as well, and it needs to get rid of that through the placenta into mom's blood, and then she exhales it. All the food that she eats will get into the baby by means of that. And then any waste, like liquid waste, urine, has to pass through the things that make up urine have to pass through that placenta into mom so that she can urinate that. So mom is providing everything that the baby needs. The uterus is going to be this muscular chamber in which the young develops, and also when it's time to be born is going to be also function to push the baby out of the uterus, in other words, to make it be born. And I'm talking about more like a natural birth. Okay? And yes, the placenta and the developing young are connected by an umbilical cord. And yours, is attached right where your belly button was. But once you're born, the blood that would flow down the umbilical cord constricts, squeezes off, so no more blood flows down there, and then your umbilical cord basically dries up, and then after a period of time it falls off. Usually mom will probably put alcohol around where it's attached to keep any infection from forming, but eventually it just falls off, because we don't need it anymore. You're no longer attached to mom. So here'd be like, this would be like a pig. Here is, this part right here would be the part of the uterus, and this would be the placenta that's attached to the uterus, and then this is the umbilical cord with its blood vessels that go in here to meet mom's blood. And so, even pigs have a place where the umbilical cord was attached. So that's the embryo. Around that is a fluid called the amniotic fluid. Remember when we talked about one of the ways that we do genetic testing on the unborn, that they can draw out some of the amniotic fluid? So they're poking a needle right straight through mom's belly into that sac where the amniotic fluid is and drawing out some of that. Why? Because some of as this baby is developing, it's also sloughing off cells on the outside like your body's doing right now. And we can collect some of those cells and look at those cells and maybe do DNA testing and stuff like that and find out, do they have the genes for, whatever. Is it, they can do that and determine if maybe the baby's going to be Down syndrome or something like that. Now anymore, they can misuse that information and in states that allow it, can have an abortion because this baby's going to be Down syndrome, we don't want it. And there are countries in, I think, what is it? Is it Holland? One of those countries right in that same area there in Europe where that they want every mother carrying a baby that's Down syndrome, they want her to abort it. Okay, so their goal is to not have any kids that have Down syndrome in their population. Well, those of you that know people who are Down syndrome, they're nice people to have around, they teach. I've noticed that families that have someone one of the siblings has that their family members have grown to really like this person a lot, and they defend them, and they don't see them as a burden or anything like that. They're just somebody they really love and care for, and they're usually, not always, but they usually are very kind, gentle, loving people, not like some people you may know, they're usually very nice people, and they are. And you have the whole range of abilities within Down syndrome. You have some of them that they can carry on a decent conversation. Maybe they won't be a valedictorian or a salutatorian, but you don't have to be that to be a productive adult. You don't have to be a valedictorian or salutatorian. I never was. Okay, so those are the parts there that make up inside the uterus. Now, after the baby is born, this gets, the baby will be born, and then they'll cut the umbilical cord, and then this placenta, mom no longer needs that because there's no baby there. So after the baby's been born, then she will get rid of the placenta. In some animals, or actually a lot of animals, I think dogs and cats, I think even cows do that, they will actually eat that placenta because it's just full of a lot of nutrients that a mother that's just given birth needs at that point to transition from carrying young to nursing their young. So for some reason God's just made it so that they'll eat that part. Now, gestation is the time, how long pregnancy lasts. In other words, from the time that the egg is fertilized to the time that it's born. And you can see for a mouse, it's not very long. But remember, mice are kind of like they're animals that are food for a lot of other animals. And there needs to be more mice for these animals to eat, so they need to keep having more and more young. Rabbits are the same way. They produce very fast. So from the time that mom gets pregnant till the time her little ones are born. Now these, if you've ever looked at little baby mice, they call them what, pinkies, I think is what they call them, that they sometimes use to feed to people who have snakes. They're just little tiny things, and they're pink, have no hair, they're blind. All they know how to do is just nurse, you know, and mom feeds them. Horse, notice that's almost a year from the time that the horse is bred to the time she produces her young. Elephants, 22 months. But notice as the animal gets bigger, the amount of time it takes to develop them where they're, you know, able to survive. A baby elephant and a horse, both of those, not long after they're born, have to be able to move around. If you've ever watched little colts after they're born, how wobbly they are in their legs because they've never walked before. They fall down a lot. Mom's not too concerned about it. They'll just keep getting up. And they have to get up to be able to nurse because where mom's milk is a long way from the ground, you know. Or as in this case here where you have a cheetah, mom just lays down and lets them nurse. And the number of places where they can draw milk, the nipples that they have, you know, in humans it's 2. But if you look at like a mother pig, a sow, she's got a whole row of those, so she can have lots of little piglets. And they can all nurse at once. Now, of the mammals that are in this category that we're talking about, mammals, 95% of them are the way we describe it here. They produce their young with a placenta. But then we have these others that we've talked about in our assignment. We have the monotremes that fit into there. They lay eggs. This would be like the platypus that lays an egg, it hatches out, but then it's nourished with milk that mom oozes out of her skin. Not all over her body, it's just in one area. But then we have what we are called the marsupials. Now, do we have any marsupials that live in the U.S.? And you probably all have seen them. What are they?
Is it a possum?
The possums, yeah, you've seen possums. They are also a marsupial. Remember, this is the one I said that the baby starts developing inside the uterus, but then it crawls out and through the skin and into the pouch that she has. And inside the pouch is where the nipples are, where they can suck milk. So she nourishes them with milk, but that's when they're really tiny. So the little kangaroo, the little Joey is pretty tiny. He has, I don't know if you ever looked at little Joeys there. They have huge ears on them. I mean, yes, they do have big ears, but the little Joey has ears that are, I mean, each ear is about as big as the head itself. You know, they're huge. So they're the pouched animals. They lack a true placenta. The immature crawl out of the uterus and up into the mother's pouch where they feed on the mother's milk. The monotremes, that was the platypus. I think there's another one beside the platypus. It's called the spiny anteaters. One name they go by, but other people know them as the echidna. You're dismissed.